This week in IT SPARC Cast, Intel shoots for the moon with Lunar Lake, D-Link unlinks, and John and Lou double down on remote work topics. Greetings and welcome to IT SPARC Cast. I'm your host, John Barger.
I'm your host, Lou Schmidt. Third time's the charm, so let's get moving.
It's Friday, September 6th. IT SPARC Cast is a digest of the IT news over the last week with insights, opinions, and a little sarcasm from two experts with over 20 years of experience working in IT or for IT vendors. And now the news bites.
All right, let's talk about some news. This one's kind of interesting. Intel just dropped their Lunar Lake CPUs. You'll see the reviews all over, so I don't have a single link for this one. Why you might care about this is going to be the thing for the thin and light laptops. And your C-suite's always asking for them, your directors, all your mobile workers want the smallest and laptop they can get with the best battery life. Your hardcore geek road warriors like John and I, we'll see, right? If we're moving around a lot, it may not matter. But there's two really interesting things I'd like to call your attention to about this upgrade from Intel. First of all, memory is integrated into the SoC, system on a chip. Where have we seen this before? We've seen this with Apple. Apple does this with their M series, and it gets you really two things. It gets you a great high-speed interface to low-energy RAM, and it gets you cost savings because you can do all this stuff in one. You don't have to do any paths for memory. So that's going to translate into better costs. The good news is they're not doing a sucky one. Current choices are 16 gig of RAM, 32 gig of RAM, which is actually fairly generous. And for most road warriors, this should be enough to get the job done, at least in my opinion. Your mileage may vary. But here's the second.
It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how that does. Apple makes the claim that even 8 gigs is enough with their architecture. I'm skeptical of that. 16 gigs is probably fine for a Windows-based system. It is really interesting that Intel is taking their x64 architecture and applying a little bit of ARM thinking to it in a full integrated SoC. We'll have to see how that does.
You know, I think it's really cool, especially since their power optimization appears to be close to what ARM is getting. But as far as the memory thing is concerned, here, I'll just ask a question. John, I've got a MacBook Air here in front of me. It's got 24 gigs. What does yours have?
So mine has 16. And there's just something in my soul that wouldn't let me buy something less than that. Even for my son, when I bought him a Mac Mini to use for school and other things, I got it with 16. I could see going to 24 or 32 if I was going to be running a lot of virtualization and things like that. Even though Apple says, that 8 is enough for a lot of tasks, it's just my inner geek just would never let me do that.
Yeah, I think if you're a geek, it's not. And if you're deploying into an enterprise environment, reach for 16. It's not that big a deal. Yeah. Another cool thing, you were right to point out, this is x86 architecture with ARM type power consumption. But here's a new thing. There's no hyper-threading. So we're used to having the hyper-threading capability. Now, for most folks, they're like, whatever, your CIO, they're not going to care. But for people like us who tend to run virtual machines and other things like in our life and sales or when we're giving demos, this is kind of an interesting change because normally you say, okay, I want to put these virtual CPUs to use and lock that stuff off. Now, what they did do is they cranked up the IPC numbers for the single thread. So this thing is really good. I don't know. Obviously, their primary target, at least to me, has been the new Qualcomm Snapdragon X Elite, which is actually a very interesting and powerful chip. And of course, we've got Apple in the M, and now we've got Intel with this stuff, with the Lunar Lake. And
then also the ARM-based Windows systems are already out there doing something similar. So this is just kind of joining the
fact, Dell announced 3 different XPS 13s this year. This was the
Right.
same form factor, 3 different processors. So it's going to get a little weird out there, and that's good. That's good. We wanted to see some movement.
Absolutely. Change. I think we've been dying for change in this area for a long time, and we've been so flat. This might actually kick things up and make some really interesting options available for us.
Yeah.
But moving on, according to darkreading.com, there's a Trend Micro report that reveals that cryptojacking has been attacking Atlassian. I always mess that up. Atlassian Confluence servers. When Lou and I were talking about this ahead of time, I messed it up like 1 out of every 2 times. But Atlassian is a company that has a lot of different products that focuses on software development, products like Jira, but they also have a product called Confluence, which is really designed to be a collaboration tool. And as the last 2 episodes, Lou and I have been talking about collaboration tools, so it's kind of interesting that we picked this up. This is almost a CVE of the week. We almost went that route with this, but we decided to talk about it in the news bites. So so far, 2 attackers are exploiting these vulnerabilities to add cryptocurrency mining to Atlassian Confluence servers. So they're able to hack in, and they're using what's called an XMRig miner via an ELF payload. So there's a lot of acronyms there. But then they're hijacking the system resources, and once they get done, they then kind of go in and they wipe out a bunch of the pieces that leave the footprint, and they leave a stay alive in the system. And then they set up this mining for cryptocurrency. Now that's what they're using it for today. But once they have this full access, it is command and control, so they can really do anything they want. So it is a really critical issue that I suggest that you patch. So we'll put a link to the article in the show notes.
So if I'm a state level threat actor, I can come in, grab your ideas as you're making them, and steal all your stuff.
In theory, yes, you absolutely could.
Ooh, that's not good. I don't like that. Okay, so we're speaking of GDPR and regulations for privacy and such. Forbes reports to us that Uber just got nailed by a rather large fine, 290 million of our favorite euro monies, which would be $347 million in the United States. They were found to have retained sensitive data from drivers on US-based servers in violation. So where you put your data, especially in this cloud world, it really, really matters. They're going to go after you. The EU folks are serious about this. I think it's a good thing. Tracking privacy is a good thing. The data included account details, taxi licenses, location data, photos, payment details, identity, and even criminal and medical data on the drivers. I mean, that stuff in the United States, that's going to get you nuked under HIPAA right there. Right. So
now you made an interesting point, Lou, about the European Union really tightening down on GDPR restrictions. We saw a multi-billion-dollar fine against Meta. And while the Uber and the Meta piece don't directly impact us as IT folks, the fact that the European Union is taking this so seriously and really amping up their enforcement of GDPR rules is really telling, and it's something that we want to be aware of. Not that long ago, when I was at in a different life, my team built a server that had access from our customers and our partners, and as well as our employees. And we were a global company, and so GDPR was something that we really had to worry about. And we had to do regular audits. So it's something that if you have any kind of content being stored based in Europe, you got to be aware of this. You got to take care of yourself, because you don't want to be the person in the news that is talking about a big fine for whatever your company might be.
And in our experience, that person who usually gets nailed if the users haven't been keeping up with this stuff is you. Right. So if you 100%. set up that server, that can be a bit of a challenge.
So next, I want to talk about GITEX Global. That's a big event coming in October of this year, of October 2024. And this is an annual show in Dubai, and it focuses across the entire gambit of technology, commercial, cellular, mobile, IT, and so forth. They focus on AI, cybersecurity, cloud, and other technologies with a big focus on digital transformation. So once that happens, Lou and I will be scouring the news that comes out of GITEX Global, and we'll let you know what they put out there. Again, I'll put a link to that event in the show notes. And now it's time for the CVE of the week.
Dun, dun, dun. This is an interesting one. I always try to find something that's a little weird for folks because we all get the alerts of the standard stuff of what's coming in our infrastructure. But I thought this one struck a really interesting note. So coming to us from bleepingcomputer.com, D-Link is warning that there's 4 remote code executions, full remote code executions that will not be patched. Why aren't they going to be patched? Because they end of life the product and they're not going to do it anymore. That kind of makes sense. And these ones are thoroughly nasty in the fact that they can actually override SSIDs. They can overwrite DHCP. They can get into a bunch of stuff. These are all rated 8 and above as far as the severity is concerned. Why are we talking about this here? One, this is what happens if you don't get legacy gear out of your network. Now, a lot of folks like to save money. We see John and I have been in and around networking for quite a long time, and we usually see people who want to save some money versus buying an enterprise class device, buy something from a vendor that is typically they'll buy a consumer class device. And this is the kind of stuff this can get you into. Now, the router that this applies to is actually a cable modem combined wireless and wired point. So the other question you have to think about in this type of thing is, beyond the fact they're not going to patch it, is are any of my C-suite running this thing? Because most of your go ahead.
In our next segment, we're going to get into our regular section on remote work and supporting remote work. But any employee could absolutely be running one of these routers. This is, by the way, the DIR 846W router from D-Link. And we know that, that the average person isn't paying attention to, I need to have the newest wireless standard. I need to have the newest thing. If this router is still working for them and they're still getting their wireless and they don't see a problem with it, you could easily see somebody running a 10-year-old router at home. And, that provides a set of risks. So there's this one, but you know what? As we support more remote workers, we need to have either understanding of what's on their network or put in place protections so that if their network is compromised, that the data that's on their laptop and maybe personal devices are not impacted.
Not only that, but let's, as we sort of migrate more into this remote work, I'd ask you to think about something when you're discussing this with the folks who control the money. There's a number that is normally associated with having somebody in an office, and that's commonly referred to as the BIS number, butts and seats. And that is normally a fairly big number. So when you start talking about remote workers and wanting to have a level of security, you might want to think about creating a program for your users that can upgrade them to the latest thing, because a modern BIS number is probably $6,000 to $10,000 a seat. How much is it going to cost you to put a really nice router into somebody's house? Not a lot. Not a lot.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that last week of the cost savings that comes with remote work, and taking some of those cost savings and apply it to the IT budget to better support those remote workers. And we'll talk more about that every week, ongoing for at least the next 10 to 20 weeks, because we've got a lot of topics on this. And speaking of which, let's get on to our main stories.
And now on to our regular segment on how IT can better support the remote workforce.
So in most of these sessions, we're going to talk about the tech that is needed, whether that's software, hardware, network related, whatever it might be. But today, I wanted to talk about, before tech, supporting remote work we need to take care of the human network. And so I'm going to talk as a manager, as somebody who has managed small and large teams, my experience of the best ways to support those remote workers. And as the IT folks that are going to try to get the company to change the way we're supporting these remote workers, we need to lead by example, and we need to have our team feel like they're being led in that way. So I took this into account. I kind of built a scenario here. IT workers tend to sit more on the introverted side, so getting them to speak up on video can be difficult. So we're going to talk about that. They may not have the best conversational skills, and that can come out in a number of different ways, whether being quiet or maybe inappropriate or whatever it might be. So here's some things I think that we need to do to best support our teams that, again, is a combination of remote workers and on-site workers. So the first and just general rule, it's always a good thing, is you need regular virtual meetings with a purpose. So you need weekly team check-ins. You need to schedule these brief meetings. They should not be an hour or 2 hours long. They need to be a half hour, depending on the size of the team, or even shorter if possible. And this should be an update on projects and team goals. You need to be aware if you're supporting multiple time zones, and we should try to make these as time-friendly for everybody as possible. So there's 3 ways to do that in my mind. One is if you can find a good time that's office time for everybody in your organization, then that's great. Use that time. So if that happens to be 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the East Coast, because you have people on the West Coast, you have somewhere else, then that's a good way to do it. The other one is to rotate the time so that each week it's at a different time so that everybody kind of feels the pain. That's if you need everybody to be on the meeting all at the same time. And none of that works, set 2 different meetings. What I find is the best way to hit the majority of the time zones on the planet is 10 a.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern time. Now, what that means is as the manager, you're going to have to be taking a meeting at 8 p.m. Eastern time on those days. But as the managers, that's what we're expected to be doing. So we take the hit, not the individual. So make it as easy and friendly for people so you don't have people joining your calls at 2 a.m. their time if they happen to be in India or wherever they might be based. You need to set an agenda. So the worst kind of meetings are the ones where you have no idea what you're going to talk about, what's going to be gone over, and all that. Those are just those classic examples of this meeting could have been an email. So make sure that everybody knows what to expect, what's going to go on, and who owes what in that meeting. This is something that a former manager of mine started, and I loved it, which is set a wellness check. So when you go around the horn, get everybody to share something, either professional or personal issues that might be in their way, something that might like slow them down or have them not deliver everything that's expected. And you need to lead by example by giving those examples. And again, this manager of mine, his name was Scott, did a great job of doing this. He opened up about himself personally, and he created a safe space. And so as an example, if I said to him, I'm just really distracted today, I'm having trouble getting everything done I needed to do, that was fine, because that happens. Everybody gets distracted. Everybody has a bad day. Everybody doesn't sleep, has a night where they don't sleep well. Make it a safe space, lead by example, be vulnerable. And then what that does is it helps everybody in the team to understand that today, Lou's not going to be providing as much input as he normally would, or not be as productive as he normally would, because there's something going on. And if it's really personal, they don't have to give those details. Make sure they're aware of that. If they're, if they got a medical issue or something else, they don't have to give the exact details of it, but saying, I got something going on that's really, on my mind, and so forth. So anyway, that's a great tip that I learned from a former manager of mine. So the other thing is rotate a facilitator. So get people to lead the meeting. That's going to do a few different things. It's going to force people out of their comfort zone if they're not comfortable with it, and it gives them the opportunity to be seen and to feel like they're a valuable member of the team. You may find that there are people that really, really have anxiety issues and can't speak on camera. That's fine. Be aware of that. Don't force them into it, but rotate the facilitators as much as possible and have them run the agenda. Again, it's a really empowering thing that a manager can do for the individuals on their team. Allow for anonymous idea submissions. So have a tool set up where people can log in, or not even log in. There's no login. They just put in notes and then you get them somehow. Those can be ideas for meeting topics, things we need to discuss, ways to improve the team. And this can be really good for those introverted or those that suffer from anxiety, and allow them to be heard without actually having to speak up in a what could be a very uncomfortable situation for them. Now, next, I want to talk about what I call tailored engagements. In this case, that's where the one-on-one meetings come on. And I feel that one-on-one meetings are one of the most important things you can do for the people on your team. And it needs to be set regularly. You need to meet with them, hopefully weekly, but I would say every other week at the outside. And make sure that it's in their time zone. So if you have somebody that's in India or in APAC, stay up late at night, meet with them at 9 o'clock at night or whatever it might be. Don't make them shift to your schedule. All right. So as a leader, we need to be giving in that way and not force them to think that they have to work outside of their work hours. Now, this meeting is designed to understand the individual's needs and concerns. It's not a status check. Status can be part of it, but it really needs to be what's going on. What can I do to help? Is there anything that's concerning you, or anything that might get in the way of the project above and beyond the wellness check that we talked about? Next, and this is probably the most critical piece of the meeting, is to give feedback. Positive and constructive feedback is critical. I know I could think back to a manager that I had. We sometimes had meetings once a month, but they would skip and so forth. And they were really very little feedback to me. And I always wondered where I sat with that manager. Was I somebody like doing what I was needed to get done? Was I over exceeding what he expected, and that's why he wasn't giving me feedback? Or did he just think that I was useless and not providing what he needed, so he just didn't bother? It provides a lot of angst. So feedback is critical.
Can I give you one tip for this one? This is a useful tip that I picked up from another one of my managers, one of my first remote managers, which is at the end of the meeting, the end of your one-on-one, you should always ask, is there anything I should be doing that I'm not doing now? What I like about that question is it's not confrontational. It's not about whether you're doing well or not. It's just a question of saying, hey, did I miss something? And I find it makes both people in the conversation really stop and think about, okay, what are the taskings are going on right now? I find it to be a really useful one.
So that's a great point. And I think that question goes both directions. So from the leader, the manager talking to the individuals, but also you speaking to your manager, asking that same question. Because what I find is the higher up you go in the corporate structure, the less feedback you give to the people below you. So manager to director to senior director to VP or whatever the levels are, I always found I got less and less feedback. And then really, really important, never cancel a one-on-one, especially without some sort of information. So just to get a cancellation of a one-on-one with my manager is, again, it impacts you emotionally. Reschedule it if you need to. If you've got a conflict, that happens. That's obvious. But don't cancel it. Reschedule it, because then they know it's still going to happen. That they are still on your mind, and it's just critical. I always got one of those. I'm not a particularly anxious person, but when I would see a cancellation of a one-on-one come through, it was like, And I had one manager that did it all the time. It was just constant. And I was just like, does he even really care what I'm doing? So the other one is flexible involvement. So you want to respect the varying levels of comfort and social interaction on your team. So you want to allow these team members to opt into certain team activities rather than mandating participation. And that's going to come when I talk later about team building activities. So not everybody's going to be comfortable with sharing their personal issues right now with a group, right? They may not be comfortable with certain physical challenges, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. Whatever it is, make sure that you're being aware of of who they are, how they operate, and what's important to them. This will really become important when I talk about the team building topic a little later. And then this was really critical. And I always had a conversation the very first time I met with anybody that was on my team. And I had this conversation with Lou. I've had it with every other person that it's ever reported to me is, first of all, you want to foster open and honest conversations. You want to make sure that they're aware, that you're aware that everybody makes mistakes and that no matter how big that mistake is, come to me. I'll help you fix it. I'm not going to immediately start, getting into you about why this happened. But on the reverse side of that is, don't let me be surprised by hearing about this issue, whatever it is, from somewhere else. And then, just as important as saying it is, you have to make good on it. So, and I can just ask Lou, have you ever come to me with something that went wrong and I just lit you up because of it?
Never.
Okay.
And vice versa. When I would come to you with challenges that I think needed some improvement, I never felt uncomfortable in that environment.
Right. So I feel that's really, really important and helps foster. That's true whether they're remote or not, but it's just a good piece of information there. And then last, I have a title here that says "Weak Managers Micromanage." So if you're micromanaging individuals or the entire team, there's a problem. The problem is either them or it's you. So be aware of that, because there really should not be a reason to micromanage. You hire people to do a job. You need to trust that they're doing the job. Now, it's okay to set goals and have check-ins, but you need to give trust and responsibility. If an employee says they're going to get something done and they don't get it done, then you have a conversation with them about it. You can't be harping on them every day. Like, how far are you into this? How far are you into this? If you've learned that they constantly miss goals, then you need to investigate that. Are the goals unrealistic? Are they a slacker? What is the situation there? But if you find yourself micromanaging, again, the problem is either them or you, and you need to fix it. And then this one's pretty straightforward, is you need asynchronous communication tools. You need tools like Slack, Microsoft Teams, Zoom has a chat feature. There's all kinds of other methods of doing this. Lou and I use text messages, and it just seems to work best because that's what we have. Now, that's just a two-person thing. Now, when you do this, actually organize. Again, Slack and Teams are generally pretty good at this. I don't find Teams very good at video and collaboration, but it is a good chat and sharing of information tool. Set up channels. So there's maybe a general topics channel, maybe channels per topic, maybe channels per team, but then also set up one that's not work related. Let people talk about their hobbies and share tech humor, share memes and things like that. That's going to allow people to get to know each other, become more friendly with each other, and become a team. All right. And then very, very important, be responsive. When somebody sends a message on this, don't let it sit for 2 hours or 2 days, or whatever it might be. When I let a message come to me and I don't deal with it, I forget about it. Right. It's not top of mind. So you need to make sure that you are being responsive and you are making sure that they know that they're being heard in those messages.
It's really interesting.
Now,
I'm sorry,
can
I interrupt here? It's really interesting that you pointed out how text is working rather well for us. Now that most platforms, like if you're running Android, you can open up your text messaging in a tab. There's something similar for Apple. Going back to text messaging, which works everywhere and has a very lightweight footprint. I was thinking about talking to John. Geez, do we need to bring up Teams or something? I'm like, no, this is working. This is working really well. Absolutely. So why not?
They let people communicate the way they feel comfortable. If they want to type out a message, great. If they want to send a video message, great. If they want to send an audio message, great. I think that even applies to weekly status updates. If you need weekly status updates, not everybody does, but if you do, allow video, audio, or written updates. And the thing is that with the tools that we have today, those can be transcribed into notes and summaries and something very usable, so that if somebody sends you a video and says that this is what I'm working on, I had this problem and this problem, you can get a very concise play of that from of the various tools that are out there. So I would highly recommend that. Again, allows them to be more comfortable. Sometimes sitting down to write up a status report, again, can be one of those things that drives anxiety. But if I just want to talk about it, yeah, I can do that. So just allow people to do whatever makes sense. So now let's get into something a little bit more fun, and I think is still very important, which are team building activities. So set up virtual coffee breaks or virtual games or some other casual get together. Have it the people in office get together in a room, have people remote join via whatever your video collaboration tool is, and then make sure that people are just welcome to drop in and chat. It's not required, right? It's not something that they have to do. They might be heads down on a task right now, but they are open and welcome to join at any time. If possible, encourage them to have video on. So again, it feels a little bit more like they're in the room. And then set up, in addition to that, you can set up collaborative challenges. So maybe it's setting up a coding challenge. Maybe it's puzzle solving or something else that just kind of takes your mind out of the work for a little bit, lets me get a break, but do it with my team so I feel that connection to them, and then move on from there. And then this last one is something go ahead, Lou.
A personal experience I've had with this type of thing is that, and this is something John and I are going to be addressing in a lot of future episodes, the difference between a meeting and a huddle, right? The cool thing about the virtual coffee breaks and the virtual events, whether you're gathering on site or virtually, get everybody turning on their cameras, is that's where you get the hallway conversations. And those 100%. Are where your best ideas come from. So pay attention to that one.
No doubt. That's a good point. Thank you. Another one is activity competition. So I think one of the things that I noticed, so just open and honest, when COVID hit, I started working extra hours, pushing really, really hard to get things done. And I put on a lot of weight. Now I've lost most of that, but since then, over a 2-year period, I put on a lot of weight. I went up multiple clothing sizes and I just wasn't moving. Encourage people to move. And you can do that. There are various apps that will allow you to have team-based activities. So the two that I'm going to mention are one called Challenges and the other one called the Conqueror Challenge. Again, I'll put links in the show notes. These are apps available both for Apple and Android. And then what you do is you create challenges. So the Challenges app is really about hitting fitness goals, hitting certain number of steps, a certain number of, if you're an Apple person, closing your rings, things like that. And the Conqueror Challenge is more of you're in a virtual world. It might be the real world, but it might be Middle Earth from Lord of the Rings, or it might be the world of Harry Potter, or whatever it is, where you walk, you use your bicycle, whatever it might be. It could be a treadmill, it could be a stationary bike, or it could be outside, and you move along a path. And every point along the way, you get a virtual postcard. And then at the end, if you win, you actually get a medal mailed to you. So there is a cost to this, but it's not a real high cost. So those I found really engaging, and I've run them for my team. I've been parts of other teams. And again, these can be as individuals or as teams. So you have somebody who's less physically inclined, partner them up with somebody who is more physically inclined so they can cover each other in that way. So I think that's really, really important. And then under the team building activities, make sure that they all have access to some sort of online training system. I'm partial to Udemy, which is Udemy, and I'll again put a link in the show notes. But there's also things like LinkedIn Learning, which is more affordable than Udemy in general, but I don't find it quite as rich in content. And encourage them to, we're talking about, engineering-minded people. They all want to learn. That's part of who we are. We want to learn more. But encourage them to use the tool for personal projects and things they want to learn on their own, as well as things that'll help them with their job or their next job. When I had access to Udemy, my son, who at the time I think was 10, he and I started going through electronics courses with the goal of building a robot. And he was learning how resistors work and all those things. And I felt really, I'm not sure I would have done it if I had to pay for the course, even though it may not have been that expensive, but it was available to me. So I took advantage of it, and I felt very fortunate to be able to do that. Now, this last section is about giving recognition for contributions. So we all have our moments where we feel like we've gotten something big, and then nothing ever gets mentioned of it. So in those weekly meetings, highlight both the big and the small wins, and make sure that you are very clear about who it was that was responsible for it. And if you were the one that was majorly responsible for it, who was the next person, and give them the credit for it, because that's what it is to be a manager, is to make sure that they know that they were seen making good. Now, the critical feedback is done on one-on-ones, not in the team meeting. But highlighting those successes and those wins is great. And then everybody now wants to be one of those people. So they're going to actually work harder and do a better job because they want to get those kudos. Make sure you're acknowledging those contributors who might not be as vocal. So you need to be really keen on what's going on your team and who's doing what, so that that you're able to highlight them, and they might even be surprised because they're not really talking about the great things they're doing. And then also allow for peer recognition. So this is really important, where if I felt, if Lou and I are peers here, so if I felt Lou was doing a great job, I could submit through some sort of portal, or just through emails to my manager saying, you know what, I was having a rough day and really need some help. Lou stepped in and made sure that I hit my deadline. And then that could either go up on like a kudos board on a website or in your collaboration tool, or you could even give away gift cards, $25 Starbucks card or something like that. I will say, though, that international can get tricky when it comes to gift cards. I've had cases where they're not always accepted. If you buy a gift card in the US, it may not work in other countries, and vice versa. So just be aware of that. And that's my spiel on how to be a good manager for your combined remote and on-site employees.
So I will say this: I would work for him again.
I appreciate
Not only that,
and I would have you work on my team anytime.
I'm here. We're here. Whatever. Somebody's going to work for somebody. We don't really care. But I'm just saying, these were great. Seeing it in action was really, really a great learning experience for me as a manager. And
we're all a combination of our experiences, right? So honestly, when I became a manager a long, long time ago, I was very young, and I had kind of bad examples of what being a manager was, and it impacted the way I was a manager. And if you talk to somebody that I was managing at 25 years old, they probably would never work for me again. But people that, as I hit my late 30s and 40s, those people will absolutely come work for me again. It's just something you have to learn. You have to dedicate yourself to. So to wrap up today's episode, I want to share some feedback from one of our listeners. So the last two episodes, we had conversations about collaboration tools, and Kanger said in an email that he recommended that we checked out a tool called Miro for collaboration. And he was noting that while he was just getting started with it, there's a lot of potential for a variety of use cases. He also mentioned Obsidian as another great tool for managing information across multiple projects, especially for those who need access from any device, which is one of the things that Lou and I are looking at. So Kanger, thank you so much for the suggestion. We are going to be looking at those. Lou's already looked at both of them. I'm going to be looking into them as well and seeing if they can help. As a follow-up from last week, as we mentioned that we're using Apple Notes, we're both having some issues, nothing major, but enough that you notice it, issues with Apple Notes. Lou had a situation where it crashed on him. I had a situation where my cursor was jumping around and the edits were weird. So even Apple Notes isn't perfect. So we're going to continue to look for that perfect collaboration tool. And when we find it, we'll let you know.
We'll also be looking at how to the video tools as well. Things we can do for huddles. And the other thing is, how do we mix this all together, right? We've seen a number of tools here. For example, Atlassian Confluence, right? Here's a big tool we might want to take a look at. How does that integrate the video, the audio, the real-time communication, and the idea boards to get us something out the door? With our goal is to make a better podcast for you folks. But as we go through and we learn all this stuff, you can learn from our mistakes.
Yeah. So do you have any topics you want us to cover? Do you have any suggestions for tools, whether it's collaboration or otherwise, that you want us to look at and see if it would work for us and maybe work for you? Send us feedback at itsparkcast.com. That's feedback at itsparkcast.com or at IT SPARC Cast on X. You can also find us on YouTube. If you search for IT SPARC Cast, you'll be able to find us there and be able to watch the video version of this. And we're also available on your favorite podcatcher. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. That's really going to help this channel grow so we can reach more people and get better at what we do. So that's going to wrap up this episode. We'll be back next week with more news and opinions from the world of enterprise IT.
Thanks for coming by.